Do it again, and I promise I'm not shaking because of all the nicotine you just did. Or maybe I am, and maybe you are, because maybe you did. I don't know. But maybe you're one of the folks that I've seen who started using nicotine pouches for before or during jiu-jitsu class, or just in your everyday life. I did a little research on it because I was curious. Turns out just because you ain't smoking it, yeah, I mean, you aren't fucking your lungs, but you also aren't optimizing your gains. Here's the thing. Live your life, do what you're going to do, but also know the consequences and then make a choice. Be informed about what's going to happen. I think that's the important thing here. So if you decide that you're going to do nicotine pouches, it is not a moral judgment, but if you're trying to optimize what you're doing in the gym, if you're trying to optimize what you're doing in class, in jiu-jitsu, if you're looking to compete, if you're a professional competitor or an amateur competitor, and you just want to do the best you can, then make an informed choice about what's going to happen, even by these little tobacco pouches. So what happens when we chew on these things? Let's take a look at what the research tells us. So nicotine in any form, regardless of whether it's inhaled or chewed or patched or done through, suppository, whatever. Are there any positive sides to using nicotine as some kind of supplement in your daily routine or even just your workout routine? Maybe. It may slightly enhance your focus and your reaction time and your motor coordination in low doses. It has a mildly stimulant effect, and that's what stimulants do. So you could potentially see that, but it's also for non-dependent users. If you've developed a chemical dependence to it, those benefits go away. And if we're going to compare, you're probably much better off if you want those same effects to just have some caffeine before class. Now, there's the other parts of having caffeine that late in the day. We can get to that in a little bit later. But aside from that, the margin is really, really narrow for the benefits. Like, you're going to see a slight increase, but there's probably other things you could do that will make that be better, or you wouldn't even really notice a difference, to be honest. It's all psychological. And reliance on something like nicotine to have that explosiveness, that focus, that reaction time, coordination, well, then that reliance can actually become the enemy of consistency. And we want to be consistent with what we do in our training, and we want to be able to do it without it. So, okay, there's just something to think about. So there are some small, short-lived cognitive enhancing effects that you could get possibly from nicotine, but tolerance and dependence very, very quickly develop when we're doing this. And then those benefits go away. So right away, there's a major problem, right? Okay, but let's look at the other side. What does nicotine really mess with? Again, this is nicotine in any form. Well, the first thing, and probably the most important thing of all of these, is it dramatically reduces your sleep quality. And let's face it, sleep is everything when it comes to sports, when it comes to physical well-being, when it comes to mental well-being. Sleep is everything. Sleep is when our body recovers. It goes into recharge mode so we can do all the things tomorrow, whether that's just going to work or dragging ourselves out into a treadmill or doing a 6-mile run in the morning, the gym, jiu-jitsu, just being healthy in general. Sleep is everything. It cannot be replaced. It is S tier, goated for all time. The most important thing we can do for our bodies is get good sleep. Sleep is also when our body consolidates memories. And we did a whole thing, I think that was the previous video, it should be out now, about neuroplasticity and about how visualizing techniques can actually help improve muscle memory and are in some ways just as good as drilling the techniques. Well, sleep is also when our brains consolidate all of our memories and it builds new and stronger neural pathways. This is what leads to technique retention, quicker implementation of technique. Sleep, we need that. Nicotine directly interferes with that. So right away, we're setting ourselves up for not optimized performance, even if we don't look at anything else that's going on. It disrupts our sleep. Now, here's the next thing. Nicotine causes cardiovascular strain, and it does so in two different ways. It increases your heart rate, and it also increases blood pressure. All right. And this is not like increasing my heart rate in a healthy way where I'm rolling and my heart rate needs to go up to keep up with the oxygen supply demands. And what it actually does is by increasing our heart rate this way, it's actually reducing our cardio efficiency because it's racing. Our heart is racing for no reason. There's no stimulus that's causing it to happen that way. Now, reduced cardio efficiency, which is essentially the most simplest way to describe it, is the ability for our heart to pump blood and oxygen and the stuff our muscles need to those muscles. It's not going to be operating in an efficient manner, which leads to gassing out more quickly. Right there. So you're not going to have enough gas to get through the round. You're going to be more gassed going into the next round. So not getting the most out of what it means. Also, you're not going to be having as much fun, if nothing else. It leads to increased perceived exertion. Okay, so it's not necessarily that you are exerting yourself more, which you might be a little bit because of that reduced efficiency, that reduced cardio efficiency, but also it's increasing your perceived exertion, which will lead to mental or something else called systemic fatigue. And that is a real thing. If your brain is feeling tired and your entire system is feeling tired because the task itself just seems like a lot more work than it really needs to be, that can happen in the gym. If you're not mentally with it, you're not going to be able to hit your PRs in the gym, just lifting weights, right? This is the same thing. And now because of that decreased efficiency, because of your increased perceived exertion, now recovery takes longer, both in between rounds and afterwards. So now we're having decreased recovery here, but we're also having decreased recovery from the sleep. So that's a double whammy, all right? Now, the other thing that happens is it increases our blood pressure. And can we just talk about that for a second? How even slightly elevated blood pressure at any age, what that does to our long-term health. That is like the big killer out there, high blood pressure. If you don't deal with that, that will lead to problems now, and it will definitely lead to problems down the line if it's just not taken care of. So what does elevated blood pressure do? Again, elevated blood pressure. This is what nicotine does. Elevated blood pressure. The first thing it does is it creates a low-grade inflammatory state in the entire body. So what does that mean? You're basically inflamed all the time. Now, there is some good inflammation that we don't want to get rid of, right? Like if we go and lift heavy in the gym, that is creating inflation. We want that, inflammation and inflation. Big, strong muscles. But it's going to create some inflammation. We want that inflammation. That's what's going to lead to those muscle fibers getting bigger and stronger and then multiplying, right? There's the inflammation we get when we're injured. We actually want that inflammation. That's good inflammation. It tells our body that there's something wrong, and that inflammation is all the stuff that our body needs to repair that going to that place. So we don't want to reduce that. But if we're just walking around daily in a generally inflamed state, that's going to mean slower muscle recovery. I mean, think about that. It's like if you have a fire department and you have one fire every day, that fire department can deal with that. But if an entire block goes up in flames, it becomes that much harder for that fire department, that one firehouse, to then deal with that. And now if like 8 different places are on fire, shit's burning down. I mean, that's all that's going to happen, right? This is the same thing. If our entire body is inflamed, we will lack the resources to properly address everything that needs to be addressed. It means slower muscle recovery, higher injury risk, less adaptation. All bad things when it comes to sport. All bad things generally for life. Let's just say that maybe, okay, you're doing the nicotine and you only have slightly elevated blood pressure, or even early stage hypertension leads to arterial stiffening. What does that do? Less elastic arteries means a higher blood pressure during exertion. So it means that your blood vessels aren't able to expand the way they need to expand for the increased amount of blood flow that's supposed to be being sent to muscles. It means more strain on your heart. It means that you're operating less efficiently in general, and now your heart has to pump that much more to push all of the blood through that's required just to make you operate in a physical environment. that higher blood pressure has been linked also to cognitive decline, and it starts earlier than you think. Long-term elevated blood pressure is linked to reduced executive functioning and memory. Well, we want those things. Executive functioning is very simple, the ability to do the things, to say, I need to take out the trash, and then being able to go out and take the trash. Anybody with ADHD will completely understand how that works, because if you have ADHD, part of that is an executive functioning issue where just doing simple tasks becomes nearly impossible mentally for us to overcome, right? Well, higher blood pressure can lead to that. So if you already have ADHD, it's going to make it worse. But even if you don't have already have executive functioning issues, it can lead to that, where just that motivation to do the things like go to the gym, go to class, take out the garbage can be harder and harder to do over time. It reduced memory. The brain suffers from reduced blood flow. And it actually gets microvascular damage from higher blood pressures. So we're essentially causing low-key brain damage through prolonged and chronic nicotine use. Another thing that happens with nicotine, because of how it interacts with our system, and you can see there's a lot of strain. Nicotine itself is really focused on the cardiovascular system. There is a higher risk of sudden cardiac events, even if you're fit. Young athletes are not immune to cardiac remodeling from a high blood pressure. Again, high blood pressure is just awful, and it can actually cause cardiac events earlier in life. If you're in your 20s, you shouldn't have to worry about this unless you have some kind of genetic predisposition to it. But even if you don't, it can start causing issues with your heart at a very early age. To me, that's just kind of a no-brainer. Sudden cardiac arrest in sport has been linked to undiagnosed hypertensive heart changes. So high blood pressure in general can cause this. And if nicotine is causing high blood pressure, that's going to be a bit of an issue that maybe we want to address. The other thing that happens with us having higher blood pressure is it compounds fatigue. Because remember, we talked about we're going to have higher perceived effort. Our cardiovascular system is not going to be operating fully. That elevated blood pressure can also mimic the same symptoms as overtraining. And overtraining is a physical risk with any sport. It leads to poor sleep, it leads to fatigue, mood swings, poor adaptation to training. All the benefits we're trying to get out of all of our training, we will no longer have because we're chewing on these little nicotine pouches. You're not just tired, your entire system gets stressed. Now, there are two other things we need to look at when it comes to nicotine use. Again, nicotine in any form. The first thing is it can actually cause some dehydration because nicotine is a mild diuretic. So dehydration, that can lead to cramping, that can lead to injury, because if you're combining being mildly dehydrated with rolling and sweating, or maybe you're just forget to drink water guy, what do you get? You get muscle cramps, you get decreased performance, you get increased injury of risk. Talk about cognitive decline. You get increased injury risk. These aren't things that we want as athletes. Look, again, you got to live your life. It's perfectly legal to do. And if you're popping one in your cheek before you come to class, I'm probably never going to know. And honestly, even if I did, I'm not judging you for that. But I think it is good to understand what the consequences of doing that are and then making an informed decision. My opinion, one guy who's been doing sports of all kinds for all of my life, I always want to be able to give my absolute best. And I don't want anything to get in the way of that I have control over. So something like nicotine in any form, to me, is just like, no, I know this is going to take away my ability to perform at my best. So that's just the science behind it. You got to make your own decisions, though. Anyway, if you like this content, thank you, first of all, for taking the time to watch this absurdly long video. If you like this content, like, follow, subscribe, follow me on Instagram at St. Brian BJJ. And yeah, I'm Brian Wiggins, and this is No BS BJJ. Thank you for taking the time.